before I learned about the ideologies and critical race theory, this statement where you just said, I had to sort of have this self-awareness of I am a Black woman and I don't want to become across as the angry Black woman. I have never in my life thought of that ever. I never looked at myself as different ever. And these theories are doing that to our children. That makes me very angry.
Okay, so let's jump in. I want to hear your story.
Sure. Yeah, so I am new to Utah. I am actually loving calling myself a Utah now, officially. I have a driver's license. And what I did when I got my driver's license is psychologically, I had one foot in Alaska, which is where I was born and raised, and where we were living as a family. I had one foot in Alaska and had one foot in Utah.
Have you been to Utah before?
We had visited. My husband actually graduated from the University of Utah many, many years ago, but that's changing. I don't know that my children will ever go to that university now because of what's going on there. Because it's not just our K-12 public education systems that are corrupt and dysfunctional. This started in academia. That's the sidebar. But yes, I had visited many times, and my husband went to school here. We have family here, his side of the family. And every time I visited, I took a look at the Wasatch Mountains. Ooh, I could live here, I told my husband. And so an opportunity came up and we applied here in Salt Lake City. He got a job and we relocated from Alaska in August of 2021 to start a brand new school year. Yeah. And so we are new to Utah, but we are Alaskans through and through. That's where both of us were born and raised. After high school, a lot of Alaskans leave because you feel very isolated. So like most kids in Alaska, we both left at graduation. He went to college. I went down to Portland, actually. Lived all over the east side of Portland for about 8 years. Lived and worked. And then we reconnected in the Pacific Northwest. He was in Washington State. I was in Oregon. We got married in the Columbia River Gorge. Babies in Tacoma, and we lived in Gig Harbor for 9 years.
Oh, wow. We were neighbors.
Yes.
I was in Homish. So
when I heard your story, I was like, I have got to go say hello to her. So I'm giddy that we're finally connecting and talking. So then we eventually a job came available in our hometown in Soldotna, Alaska, and Kenai, Alaska is where I'm from, the Kenai Peninsula. Yeah. And we moved back to our little town. And we had been there for the last 9 years in Alaska. So that's our short story of where we've been. And it tells you a lot about the things we've experienced in the states where we've lived. So we're back here in Utah, making our home. It's good to be here. Utah is beautiful. It has a beauty of its own that I am strategically trying to fall in love with, because my heart is breaking for leaving my home state. I miss it dearly. If I talk about it anymore, I'll probably start crying. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to strategically fall in love with right where I'm at. So that's my goal.
Bloom where you're planted, right? But how about, because you were already an advocate in Alaska.
That's right. Yeah. So man, how long has it been? I think about this before I talk to people. I really started learning about the K-12 public education system probably in 2015. And then a series of things happening. I have 3 children, and they have all gone through public, or not through, but are in public education. And there was a series of things that happened that caused me to go, what? You're gonna do what? And you kind of dismiss it and you don't understand what's going on. It's tricky, really tricky. And finally, about, I would say 2016, 2017, there was some major things going on for my children. And I was in the schools, mind you. I am that parent who has been there from the start. And I say this often, I have spent thousands of hours inside public education, volunteering my time, because I believe in the parent-teacher partnership. I believe that that is how this gets done. It doesn't get done any other way. A child is not a mere creature of the state. They're parents' children, and they're our responsibility. And so that is why I was in those buildings, supporting our good teachers. And so,
To the choir, by the way, I'm the same way. I lived at school from the second my son was born. I was like, well, I'm going to be a PTA mom. I already know this. Like this is life, And it was so shocking to have basically just that turn. So 2016 was that when?
Yeah.
That was when the world was devastated because the orange man was elected, right?
That's right. And I really started getting involved in politics when two people were running for the presidency that got my attention. Because before that, Carrie, and you might be like me, and I think many parents are, I was getting married, I was having babies, I was nursing babies, I was at home teaching them their ABCs, we were going to the parks. I was doing my due diligence as a mother, raising my children. And I assumed that our elected officials in the local, state, and federal government were doing their jobs. And so in 2015, I got really annoyed with myself because I didn't understand politics. I didn't understand the parties. I didn't understand a lot. And President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were running. And I was like, what is going on? And so I was determined that year. I was like, this is it. It's time. Rip off the Band-Aid. I'm going to learn about this. I'm tired of feeling ignorant. And so I called my very best friend who was involved in politics since she was a child. She was raised in it in her family. They talked about politics and she knew the issues. I had listened to her. She clearly knew. So I knew who to call. I was like, okay, all right, my friend. I said, I'm ready for it. Give me the politics 101 because I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't know these words. And she did. She summarized the party system for me in easy to understand language, and off I went. And I started listening to, you're going to laugh at this. I was still in the position in 2015, and I kind of had an idea that, the media was very biased. I had that notion. You could see it. It was very frustrating as an American to see it and not see lawsuits happening to change it. So it was very frustrating for me. So what I did is I thought, okay, I'm new to this. I know what I believe in. So what I want to do is try to find something a little bit neutral and listen to that, right? Just listen to that. What could that be? Well, I said to myself, maybe it's the public broadcasting system, right? So I started listening to NPR. And the whole time I was listening, I was like, that's not what I believe in. That's not what I believe in. No, that's not how I feel. Why aren't you talking about this side of it? Why aren't you talking about this side of it the whole time? And I did that for a year of my life. And I saturated myself in what should be neutral, right?
Right.
And I could clearly see the bias, and nobody in that broadcasting system was representing me. Nobody was saying what I believed in, and or other people around me. So it's very clear. And so all of a sudden, and at this time, Trump is running, Hillary is running. I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm doing my due diligence and researching them and understanding them. I am getting an education. Then I started going, okay, now I need to dip my toe in the media, the other media. And so I didn't want to go all the way. I didn't want to go all the way to Fox News or
Right.
I don't know, some of, I didn't want to do the extreme. So I did what I thought was the next step. Okay. The next step for me was C-SPAN. Okay. So I started listening to C-SPAN. C-SPAN started broadcasting what was going on in Congress how many years ago, right? They wanted the American public to see, they wanted that transparency. And so, and I had learned this in my little, education. So I was like, I'm going to listen to some C-SPAN. And for the first time, and by this time, Donald Trump was president. And every time I listened to NPR, they would always tell an opinion. And I never heard my president speaking. I never heard President Donald Trump speaking. So the first time in my life when I had dipped my toe into politics, I decided, okay, I've been doing this for how long? President Donald Trump, why am I not hearing him or seeing him, right? So I finally chose C-SPAN, listened to some podcasts daily, and I heard President Donald Trump because they let it air, they let it go.
Right.
And finally, I was like, it was so confirming and so validating because I didn't allow myself to go here or there.
Right.
And, and so for the first time, he and his words and his actions validated what I was seeing and thinking and feeling and understanding, that I was not getting reported on by the mainstream media, by the public media. Okay, we're done with that. Now we're going to go listen to the extremes. Just a little bit. Now we're just going to go see what they're talking about. We're going to see what they're talking about. And I think that's what we all need to do because it shows us reality. All of those entities, and when we're grabbing them, they make the picture.
Right.
Right.
When I have a funny one too. When my politics used to be South Park, I was like, they're reasonable. That's what I thought. I was like, they're reasonable. I like the fact that they go after everybody. Sounds great to me. So, and then it didn't. And then it was going to the gym, and he'd go to the gym, and half of the gym had Fox News, and half of it had CNN. And I was like, what in the world is this? And I would just try to listen to both sides. And that was an interesting experience because I'm literally getting both at the same time. And I'm watching them going, that's not what happened. Like here's the president shaking somebody's hand or laughing with the Queen of England. And here's these guys saying he made such a fool of himself and America should be totally humiliated and embarrassed. And I'm like, but you're saying that. And this is what we're watching. Yeah. Like, you need to tell the truth. And the thing that was really shocking for me, where I was like, wow, the media is about mind control, is how I felt, was that my friends who mostly went to Evergreen Community College came, I'm not even joking.
Evergreen? No.
The Evergreen. Yeah. I went to Cornish. I went to Cornish, so I'm like artistic and totally open-minded and like, everybody, I'll listen to any one type of person at that time. And then my friends started telling me, listen to Trevor Noah. He really gets it. My white friends started telling me this. And I watched the Uncle Tom movie. And I watched Trevor Noah say the most racist, bigoted, horrible things about other Black people. And I was just like, this is who you guys listen to? This is who you consider neutral and a voice for us? And it broke
Right.
so many of my relationships because I realized, oh my gosh, you think of me this way. And you think that when I say rioting and looting and all of this is not a good representation, they literally would turn to me and say, well, you just don't understand. You just don't understand your own plight.
Ooh.
And coming from where I come from and knowing my backstory, you know, I have a very good grasp of my own plight. And these people who, you know, upper middle class white people were all my friends telling me I don't know my own story. It opened my eyes to a lot. And especially like having friends who were then teachers telling me the same kind of thing. Well, I just don't think you have a full grasp. And then I'm thinking, you influenced my son.
Yeah.
And that's when it started to go, what are you doing? And the first thing that where I realized that politics were in school,
Yeah.
we switched schools. And my son walks into his classroom, first day of school, and the teacher has decorated the room and she persisted a big celebration for Hillary Clinton to win the election. And I was like, and I said to her, because I said, the election hasn't happened. This is September. We've got till November. Don't you think there should be books for both sides? And she said, no, we're not going to go there. I will not put him in our classroom. And I'm sitting there going, there's something very wrong with
That's right.
how that's going to make these, I think he was third or fourth grade. And there's something wrong with how these kids are going to feel in the classroom. And she passed around and she passed around a survey. Who are you going to vote for? In the classroom for fourth graders. And again, we switched schools and he walks in and he goes, Mom, America's not that great. And he just tells me that America's not that great. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, we're not any better than any other country. We're we're okay, but that's all. Fourth grade. And I started to go, wow, I thought I was super involved. I was the librarian twice a week. I taught reading. I thought I was super, super involved. And then I realized I have to be way more vigilant.
Yes, that's right.
So what
right.
happened with schools for you? Because I mean, you are a fierce mama activist, or advocate, I think is a better word, but yes.
I think it's both. You know, I called myself an advocate for many, many years, and it's okay to be an activist. It's okay. I think we're all activists and we're all advocates. It's both. It's both. Activism gets a really bad rap because it has a stereotype to it attached to radical feminist activism.
Yeah.
But when you are dignified and you are well spoken and you are prepared and you are well informed and you're speaking from a place of authority to your school board members, to a teacher or principal or directors at the district, you can still be an activist in that point, but you don't have to be undignified in it. You know, I think it's important to be blunt, to understand what you're saying, and to, you know, we have so much authority. I say this all the time. We have authority. It is given to us. And in Utah, it is really given to us. And the law here is on our side. We need only sit in that seat. Parents are giving up that seat to people who it is not their position. And so I started my advocacy just as a parent. I started my advocacy as a parent for issues in the school. And I very quickly, you know, I was doing this, like, you know, that what I said earlier,
Right.
like, you're what? You're doing what? And then I would watch how it would go down when a parent actually started advocating for policy, for changes in the school, even if they were positive, effective, well documented, backed up with evidence. It was a parent standing there telling the school, hey, I think we should do this. It wasn't the NEA telling them, hey, I think we should do this. It wasn't the PTA who is in line with the NEA telling them, oh, I think we should do this. It wasn't the NSBA telling them, oh, I think we should do this. It was a parent, a citizen, a stakeholder telling them, this is what's happening. Here are my concerns. I have an idea that I would like to implement at the school. And when I watched the way in which I was treated for doing that, that is when I started realizing that this is dangerous to speak up. I began getting the red X on your back as that parent, which I wear it very proudly. I think that all parents who stand up for what is right, if they get that red X and it's probably inevitable, wear it proudly because you're doing the right thing. I'm a parent, I've got 3 kids. They've been in public education now for, from preschool on up. I've got Kitty saying hello to me. I have been involved, thousands of hours volunteering. I was on PTA. I raised $13,000 for a school one year for a jogathon. I mean, I was that mom. I held the Soldotna's first pumpkin patch. We don't have pumpkin patches in Alaska, okay? So coming from the Pacific Northwest to go back to Alaska, I said, we're having a pumpkin patch for these kids. And I made it happen. I was so involved, and I got on the front page of the paper. I called the news. I said, we're having a pumpkin patch. You got to come. And they did. And we made the front page, and it was fun. And so I say, like, the first 6 years of being a mama in public education was ignorance is bliss. And then I started seeing things I didn't like, the math, and they were feeding my kids sugar constantly. Those are the issues, right? And those are the things that I started advocating for my children. You're confusing them, teaching them math this way. That was my first point of advocacy. And then second was, you're feeding them sugar. Every day they're being offered something as a reward or an incentive. And then I started for the first researching policy. Policy at the district backed up what I was saying about sugar in the schools. And I advocated for the needs of my children, and the teacher, a good one, looked at me as a equal, and she did a great job. She said, you know what? I agree. I agree. Thank you so much for speaking up. I'm gonna send out a newsletter to the parents and just ask them. And it was wonderful. And I was like, well, that was easy. Then I started going to we were in a different district. We had moved up to the Anchorage school district, and there were other issues that I needed to start researching policy about in advocating for my child's needs. And in that research, I discovered 3 words: social emotional learning. And it was in 2016.
Wow, you're ahead of the game.
And I actually bought a paper, a white paper, like a scholar paper on social emotional learning. And I read the darn thing and I was like, oh, sounds pretty good. And it's interesting because, I took parts of that and it helped me in my advocacy. We need to be kind to these children. And it didn't go well. I'll just tell you that. I decided I'm going to use the PTA to help support what I'm saying, because that's what they're there for, right?
They're supposed to, yeah.
I've been on the PTA. If a parent had come to me and said, we need some help and support in this issue, that is what the PTA should be there for. Let's come together and see the issue. And I quickly learned that if you're holding administrators or teachers accountable for their actions, you're not going to get anywhere with the PTA. You might get someplace if you have a PTO or just a parent organization. What ended up happening was it was more of, it's a front. The PTA is a front for protecting the administrators and teachers. And so when I showed up trying to advocate for what I thought I saw in policy, in action, in duty and responsibility, I was barraged. And this has happened twice in schools when I've advocated for things, barraged by the teachers. They say, oh, we got another parent. She wants to change things. So y'all need to be here for this meeting. And whose voice gets silenced?
Right, the parents.
Mine.
We're the main stakeholders in our children's education.
That's
and yet
right.
Our voices, they act like, and we don't have to agree on everything. Like every parent's going to have a little bit of a different perspective, right? But they act like none of us are valid. It's frustrating. I mean, it's very aggravating. You were talking before about how you come with authority and dignity and information. And I always, because wherever I live, I'm generally always the minority, right? And so wherever I go, I always think in my head, I don't want anybody to think of me as the angry Black woman. That is not the trope that I want to live by. And I know it sounds funny, but that's the reality. And I have to fight against that. So it's like, it's a tricky place to say that, I'm anti-tribalist. I'm not interested in the anti-racism movement. But there are things that people do put on me before they even talk to me. They just assume that I'm an angry and aggressive person, and I'm not. So when I go and I'm like, I'm here to help, sunshiny. I'm mad. I am pissed. That whole I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I feel that way with a lot of what's going on, but I never present that way. I always present, here's the information, do with it what you will.
Yes.
As for me in my house, there's no freaking way we're going down this road, and I will wake up as many people as I can on the way out.
That's
and they
right.
Still act like we are viva la revolution and we're ready to just take on. And
why they probably act that way is because that's the way they're thinking and acting. Before I learned about the ideologies, we haven't even touched on this yet, but before I learned about the ideologies and critical race theory, this statement where you just said, I had to sort of have this self-awareness of, I am a Black woman and I don't want to become across as the angry Black woman. I have never in my life thought of that, ever. I never looked at myself as different, ever. These theories are doing that to our children. That makes me very angry. And I testified about this at the Ethnic Studies Committee.
yes,
I said, my main concern about this is, as a child, as a Native Alaskan, I knew who I was. I didn't need anybody telling me at my school who I was.
yeah.
And that is my biggest concern, is this study, this commission should not be about a narrative, an idea, an ideology, a box, and taking that and opening up that pre-packaged box with an idea about who a Black person is, who a Native person is, who an Asian person is, delivering it and say, open up that box, that's who you are. You're going to get it wrong every single time.
And that even goes as far as gender. Like putting these kids into any kind of box and saying you have to be all of these things and you better fit into this box nice and tight, because if you don't, we're going to take away your box that we've built up as your only form of security, your only way that you get to be valid is when you
Yeah.
fit into the box perfectly.
And
And no one does.
And furthermore, the K-12 public education system has no business having this conversation with children. No business. It shouldn't even be there.
We're way past it. This is my problem. Working in a public, or I work at a charter, okay? They don't care until they're taught to. I used to stand in Seattle with a sign after George Floyd. I held a sign that said character matters. Reject CRT, right. They are using us. And the kids, the teenagers would drive past. Now, some of the angry mothers who have bought into this stuff would shut your mouth. You don't even know what you're talking about. But the kids would say, excuse me, can I see your sign? And then they'd say, yeah, that right there. We never cared until they taught us to. That's what the kids would say. And the little kids, they have no idea. When I watch these little children, it took them 9 months for one of them to say, oh, you're a different color than me. 9 months. They had to get all the way through the school year before they even that even hits their little minds.
That's right.
So why would we need to teach them? I mean, I think that we should teach them that we're all a box of color crayons. When all of us, that we're diverse and we all add to the picture. That's all. And no child, I see these little kids who are, especially here, Hispanic kids and white kids playing together. And then as you watch society, it gets more and more cliquey, more and more segregated willingly, where people don't really socialize with people outside of their tribe. And I feel like that's why people are okay with the CRT narrative, because the adults are already kind of there. Not all of them. In fact, I would say the majority of us, people don't care.
Right. Yeah.
But the highly educated really do. And the ethnic groups really do.
I'm so glad to hear you say this. I haven't heard many other people say the same thing that I've been saying. And it is that they're using us to advance their ideology and theories. Yes. They're using Black and brown communities and Asian, or, they're using those people.
Absolutely.
And the people who are quote unquote allies for that movement don't even realize what they're supporting and how that actually hurts people. They don't even realize it.
No, they amplify. They amplify the people who call themselves the actual Marxists. They amplify them. Here, I'm so shocked. Really? Yeah. That's who you're choosing to amplify just because they're the right color? There's a problem there. You need to listen to what they're saying. And and our school board, they think they're doing the right thing. I really do. Mom, at least a portion of them are trying to be compassionate. But I also, there's got to be something more than that, because they have to look at some of this SEL curriculum of minorities with their little fists up in the air. And they have to cringe inside. They have to go.
In Davis School District, it's a hand.
Okay, what's that story? What's the hand?
No, not here.
No more, not here.
It's not this, Carrie, but it's this, which is pretty damn close to this.
It's still teaching our kids a grievance culture.
Yes.
The most frustrating thing is that if you go into any, there's very few bookstores around now, but if you go into any bookstore and go to the self-help section and people need to heal, it is about gratitude. It is about owning your own responsibility and doing what you can with your life. And yet we're teaching our kids they can't do anything about their oppression, their perceived oppression. Yeah.
So they're doing one thing, because the counterweight to that is silenced at every single level.
Yes.
Every level. So there's a monopoly of viewpoint. So you want to talk about discrimination, we have a systemic problem with viewpoint discrimination. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. The whole diversity, the diversity team in our state, everybody thinks the exact same.
Because diversity I love Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay and how they shorten these things up, because I've listened to the hours long things, snippets that they've been doing lately. They just, the diversity is, it's not what we think it is. It's not having a Native Alaskan on the committee and a Black person and a white person and a homosexual person and whatever. That's not what this is about. Although they'll stand on that tower and defend that position, right? What they mean in diversity is the people who align with our viewpoints. Those diverse people, those people are included. That's being inclusive.
Right.
And if you're the person in charge of inclusivity, they are there to position the people of diversity on that committee, on that school board, in the legislature. The inclusivity person grabs a hold of the viewpoint, and that's all that's allowed. And they say that's equitable.
Right. And it's, equal outcomes. All of these people are supposed to have equal outcomes across the board and never be questioned for their merit. I think that if you had to look in the mirror every single day and know that the only reason that you're in your position is the color of your skin, that would cause me so much depression, to know that that is the only thing of value that I have, is the color of my skin. And there are people who don't feel that way, right? There are people who are like, sweet, bring on the money. Underneath it, I think it would be hard to go to bed at night and to rest your head on the pillow and to know that you will wreck people for your own gain.
And to think that this is the framework that they want to use in our public schools.
So what I believe, I don't know if you've seen any of my other videos, but what I think is that they've looked at what worked in the African American community. They beat these people down and said, you're incapable, let us help you. And they have such a buy-in from that community that people will tell me regularly that, how dare you try to speak against oppression? Oppression is in our DNA. And now that they've bought in, and people will not even consider another thought, not even consider it. Now that they've bought in, they're looking at the rest of our children and going, this worked for them. Let's do it on all of our kids now. Let's teach our kids who've never known hardship. Let's teach them that the world hates them because of this reason or that reason. And let's teach them really, really young, so that they have this seed of resentment that we can foster. And then they'll never accomplish anything, and they'll become that worthless class. And that is the agenda. The agenda is our children to be a worthless class of human beings,
so that they can rely on the government, not on their individual person. There's no more individual accountability anymore. There's no more of that. It's collectivism. And so you're making me think about, one of the biggest things that happened to me in Anchorage before we left. So I don't know if this is where you want the conversation to go, but we eventually I joined up with Parents' Rights in Education, which is a national nonprofit group, because I knew that was the issue. I was searching up, what is my parental rights, right? And then I discovered the group called Parents' Rights in Education. And I heard right back from the executive director. She said, we would love a chapter in Alaska. And I said, I'm your girl. So I started the Alaska chapter for Parents' Rights in Education in Alaska. And I have been banging the drum in Alaska for, I guess it's been since 2019 since I did that. And so I used that platform to elevate my voice, because it was very difficult. I, showed you a little bit about being that lone wolf and then being attacked. And that happened several times. And I knew that I was not alone. I knew that what I was doing was right. I had teachers secretly coming and telling me, keep advocating for your kids. never, ever stop advocating for them. But they wouldn't do it in the meeting. I started the Alaska chapter, and off we went. And their 3 points are valuing students, empowering parents, and enlightening communities. And so off I went. Everything that I was learning as a mom about social emotional learning, about critical race theory, about post-colonial theory, about social equity theory, about diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, everything that I was learning, I was enlightening my community in Alaska, in the state of Alaska. And then COVID hit, Now, just before COVID, I'm involved. I'm listening to school board meetings. I'm listening to work meetings. And I'm listening to committee meetings in Alaska. Our committee meetings are recorded, school board. But I'm listening to a committee meeting, and one board member is talking about something I don't know about. And it was the anti-racism and instructional equity policy. And I was like, what is this? So in the meantime, I'm watching them in school board meetings. George Floyd gets killed, the whole 9 yards, Carrie. We have a school board member. They write a statement on George Floyd of commitment to eliminating racism. So what did they do, Carrie? They used George Floyd's death to advance this, that, using a person.
It was almost like it was waiting. That's how I felt. I felt like it was waiting, because the next day,
yep,
the parent page changed completely. And it was like, nobody's staying up all night doing this. You guys had this ready.
That's right. So they wrote their statement of commitment. And this isn't just what's neat, and what might be very informative for your audience is this isn't just Anchorage School District. This was nationwide. So there is a agenda here. This is nationwide taking place. And they all did it just a little bit differently, right? Some are a little slower to the game than others, whatever. But in Anchorage, where we were living, I'm listening to this school board committee meeting, and they're talking about anti-racism and instructional equity policy. And it's like 30 pages. And I'm looking at it, and it's written by the NSBA. The NSBA writes a document, holds a meeting, or like a professional development type thing called DIRE.
Okay, I've heard of this.
And DIRE is Dismantling Institutional Racism in Education. So I'm at home as a mama raising babies. I'm like, what are they talking about? What are they even talking about? And so then what I have to do is start to research. What are they talking about? So you get on the phone, and I'm calling the school board members, and I'm doing my own research with the NSBA, with the DIRE, where this stuff is coming from. And it just leads you down this trail of money and politics and agendas and interests that are not mine. And I know they're not my neighbors. And I know they're not anybody that I know that has children in public education. So why is this being advanced? And so then, I'm involved in parents' rights and education, and I'm learning that I do have rights, that I do have authority. And I'm backed up, and not just me, but all parents are backed up with the fundamental right and authority to direct their child's upbringing, including their education. And this is backed up in 2 centuries of Supreme Court precedent. And so those good, yummy things at SCOTUS has been brought into state laws, parental rights laws, and every state has, a little different language or whatever, but we are the authority. Parents possess the fundamental authority and right to direct their children and their education. And in Utah, they hail that. And so when I arrived, I was so, so grateful to read the laws here. We are very blessed to live in the state of Utah with laws that back up what we need to protect our children. It's not the school's job to protect my children. It's my job to protect them because they lack legal capacity. And so this is language and things that I believe we have to teach the general public about, because they don't, like me, I didn't know this until I learned it. I knew it in my core, in my heart. I knew my own authority. But it's a whole different thing when you see a law in your state statute, in your state code, when you read Supreme Court rulings that say, Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, a child is not a mere creature of the state.
Right.
Those that nurture that child direct their future.
So what happens, because a lot of times when I go to the school board, they'll say, well, for as many people who have your stance, there are just as many people on the other side. Now, I don't believe that, but I believe the other side is loud. But they also feel that they have rights as parents. What are our protections in terms of, I mean, teach your child whatever you want to in your own home. How do we find, and what are the legal rights for saying, basically, don't tread on me? Leave my family alone while you do what you want to do. Because the authoritarianism that often comes, in my experience, more from the left. I honestly don't think I know anybody who's from the far right.
No.
And so the authoritarianism, the every child must know this in order for my child to feel safe and included. How do we defend against that? What are our legal rights, especially in a place where people here need to know, because the culture is to comply, not to make waves, not to cause any kind of problem. One, how do we wake up those people? Because that is the hardest thing I've ever seen. And two, where do our rights begin and their rights end?
Who's they?
I'm talking about people who, everything that we don't want in schools, okay? We don't want CRT, we don't want DEI, we don't want SEL. For my viewers, if you don't know, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, social and emotional learning through a transformative lens. Most of the people who watch me do not want this for their children. Meanwhile, we have very active people on the other side who want that for every single child and will defend it just as hard.
Yeah. So first of all, I understand what you're saying about the culture here in Utah. And when I moved here, because of my background of family and friends, I very quickly understood the people that I was now surrounded by. And it was a comfort to me to know these people already. But one of the flaws that I see is that there is a culture of kindness to not speak up for what is right. Don't make waves, and I don't want to get too religious on people or spiritual, but even Jesus in his compassion was very, very bold.
Yes.
He spoke his mind. Even Jesus was bold when he pointed to the man on the mat and said, "Get up, pick up your bed and go." And a lot of scholars go, "Ooh, Jesus, really? That guy's disabled." How could you say that to somebody who's been sitting on that mat for that long? That's not kind. And he stood up and he walked. Even compassion can be bold and full of love. And that is what I believe we need to do. We need to center ourselves in love. And that's very different than centering yourself in hate. And it's not a hateful thing to oppose what isn't right. What's happening, I've said this for years, after watching for years, the board meetings with 0 people in it except me and a few people. If you want change, you got to be there. Because in our absence, in our Self-censorship is what it is. In your self-censorship, for fear is not being kind, they're advancing agendas and interests that are hurting your children.
Yes.
They're hurting our society and they're hurting this nation. So be compassionate and loving and stand up for what is right. Be a voice for those children, because all parents are those children's authority, not a teacher, not a principal, not the school board, not the district, not the legislators, not the NEA, the UEA, the NSBA, the USBE. They are not the authority of our children. We are.